September 9, 1943, 3:15 in the afternoon, the Tyrrhenian Sea, west of Sardinia. Admiral Carlo Bergamini stands on the bridge of the Roma, the most powerful battleship in the Italian Navy. 46,000 tons of armoured steel, 9 15-inch guns, a crew of nearly 2,000 men. He is sailing to surrender. Italy signed an armistice with the Allies the day before, and now the entire Italian battle fleet is steaming toward Malta to join the enemy. Then the lookouts spot them, 11 twin-engine bombers, high above, German. Bergamini watches them circle. His anti-aircraft guns open fire, but the aircraft are beyond effective range, nearly 6,000 metres up. What happens next should have been impossible. A bomb detaches from one of the aircraft. It begins to fall. Then it changes direction. It turns. It follows the Roma as she manoeuvres. And at 3:45, it punches through her deck, crashes through 7 decks, and explodes beneath her keel. 15 minutes later, a second bomb strikes between the forward turrets. The No. 2 magazine detonates. The entire bow section vanishes in a column of fire. Roma breaks in two and sinks in 20 minutes. 1,253 men die, including Admiral Bergamini. This is the story of the He 111 and why the truth is more interesting than the legend. An aircraft dismissed as a failure by 1940 would become the platform that launched the precision-guided munitions revolution. Produced in factories that, by 1943, depended heavily on concentration camp labour, it pioneered weapons that still define naval warfare today. The standard narrative about the Heinkel He 111 goes something like this. It was Germany's workhorse medium bomber. It did well in Spain and Poland. It got slaughtered over Britain. It was obsolete by 1941. End of story. Here is what that narrative leaves out. The He 111 did not fade into irrelevance after the Battle of Britain. It became the testbed for the most revolutionary weapons of the Second World War. The Fritz X guided bomb. The Henschel Hs 293 guided missile. Weapons that sank battleships from beyond anti-aircraft range. Weapons that killed more than 1,000 American troops in a single ship. Weapons that forced the Allies to invent electronic warfare as we know it. The He 111 story is not about a bomber that failed. It is about what happens when an obsolete aircraft becomes the carrier of something unprecedented. If you are finding this interesting, hit subscribe. More deep dives like this are coming. Understanding why the He 111 ended up carrying guided missiles requires understanding why Germany had no other options. The aircraft first flew on February 24, 1935. Designed by brothers Siegfried and Walter Günther at Heinkel, it was presented to the world as a civilian airliner, a deception to circumvent Versailles Treaty restrictions. When the V4 prototype was unveiled to foreign press on January 10, 1936, Nazi propaganda claimed it was the world's fastest passenger aircraft. Internally, engineers called it a wolf in sheep's clothing. In Spain, with the Condor Legion from 1937, the He 111 proved devastatingly effective. 94 aircraft were delivered, and losses to enemy action totaled just 21. The bomber could outrun most contemporary fighters. German planners drew a fatal conclusion from this success. Speed alone protected the bomber. Defensive armament remained minimal, just 3 hand-operated MG-15 machine guns firing rifle-caliber rounds through small openings in the glazed nose and fuselage. The aircraft entered the Second World War in September 1939 with over 800 in Luftwaffe service across 5 Geschwader. It performed adequately in Poland, though losses were heavier than expected against determined Polish fighter pilots. During the May 1940 Western Campaign, 641 He 111s were available, contributing to the Rotterdam Blitz and destruction of French rail networks. By the Battle of Britain, the aircraft's limitations were catastrophically exposed. 2 Junkers Jumo 211F2 engines produced 1,340 horsepower each, which meant a top speed of approximately 435 km per hour at altitude. Spitfires and Hurricanes were 150 km per hour faster. The distinctive greenhouse nose, designed to give the bombardier excellent visibility, made the clustered 5-man crew extraordinarily vulnerable to head-on attacks. On August 15th, 72, He 111s attacking northeast England from Norway met resting RAF squadrons and lost 8 aircraft in a single disastrous mission. Between July and October 1940, the Luftwaffe lost 242 He 111s, roughly half the starting establishment. On September 15, Battle of Britain Day, Formations including He-111s from KG-26 and KG-53 were mauled by RAF fighters. 2 days later, Hitler indefinitely postponed Operation Sea Lion. The bomber that had terrorised Guernica was now a death trap over England. Germany tried to replace the He-111. Both attempts failed spectacularly. The bomber program produced the Heinkel He-177, Germany's only heavy bomber, an insane requirement for dive bombing capability, and the use of paired engines that kept catching fire made it notorious for killing its own crews. The Bomber B program selected the Junkers Ju 288, which depended entirely on the Jumo 222 engine, a 24-cylinder monster that never became reliable despite roughly 300 development prototypes. 22 Ju 288 airframes were built. At least 17 crashed. The result was that Germany's most important bomber remained an aircraft designed in 1934. Over 6,500 He-111s would be built, with production continuing until September 1944. By then, the aircraft had found new purposes: torpedo bombing Arctic convoys with KG-26, transport missions during the catastrophic Stalingrad airlift, where 165 of 300 He-111s were lost, and something else entirely. While the He-111 was failing over Britain, Dr. Max Kramer at the German Aviation Research Institute in Berlin was experimenting with remote-controlled bombs. By 1938, he had fitted radio-controlled spoilers to test ordnance. By 1940, working with Ruhrstahl AG, he had created something that had never existed before: the Fritz X, formerly designated the Ruhrstahl SD 1400X. It was a 1,570-kilogram armor-piercing guided bomb built around the existing PC-1400 bomb casing. The warhead contained 320 kilograms of amatol explosive, capable of penetrating 130 millimeters of hardened armor plate, which meant it could punch through the deck armor of any battleship afloat. What made it revolutionary was the guidance system. An annular tail unit, roughly 1.4 meters in diameter, contained spoilers for pitch and yaw control, stabilized by an internal gyroscope. During its steep dive, the Fritz X reached transonic speeds of over 1,200 kilometers per hour. In testing from 6,000 meters altitude, 50% of bombs fell within 15 meters of the aim point. This was precision unimaginable with conventional bombing. The bombardier in the aircraft watched a bright magnesium flare on the bomb's tail and steered it using a joystick connected to the Kehl-Strasbourg radio control link. The FUG-203 Kehl transmitter in the aircraft fed commands to the FUG-230 Strasbourg receiver in the bomb across 18 selectable channels in the 48 to 50 MHz band. Approximately 1,400 Fritz X bombs were produced by Rheinmetall Borsig between April 1943 and December 1944. Simultaneously, Professor Herbert Wagner at Henschel Flugzeugwerke developed the HS-293, a fundamentally different weapon. Where the Fritz X was an unpowered bomb designed to punch through battleship armor, the HS-293 was a rocket-boosted glide missile intended for unarmored and lightly armored ships. A Walter HWK-109507 liquid fuel rocket motor burned concentrated hydrogen peroxide designated T-Stoff, catalyzed by calcium permanganate designated Z-Stoff. This produced 600 kilograms of thrust for 10 seconds, accelerating the missile to 950 kilometers per hour before it glided to target. The weapon weighed just over 1,000 kilograms at launch and carried a modified 500-kilogram high explosive warhead. Over 1,000 operational units were produced, making Henschel the first company in history to mass-produce guided missiles. The first unpowered HS-293 drops occurred from He-111 bombers between May and September 1940. The first powered test launch took place on December 16, 1940, at Peenemünde. The He-111 H-12 variant, 37 aircraft rebuilt from H-6 airframes with the ventral gondola deleted and external ETC racks for 2 missiles, was specifically designed as an operational carrier. Early testing proved the concept worked. The obsolete bomber had become the mother of the guided missile. The weapons the He-111 had nurtured were unleashed on that September afternoon in 1943. Following Italy's armistice announcement, Admiral Bergamini sailed from La Spezia with 3 battleships, Roma, Vittorio Veneto, and Italia, plus 3 cruisers and 8 destroyers, all heading to surrender to the Allies at Malta. German intelligence tracked the fleet. 11 Dornier Do 217s of the 3rd Group of KG-100, armed with Fritz X bombs, scrambled from their base in southern France to intercept. Major Bernhard Jope commanded the formation. At approximately 3:37, his bombardier, Unteroffizier Laurie Klaproth, guided the first Fritz X that struck Roma, near missing the starboard side but jamming her rudder. At 3:45, a second bomb struck the starboard side aft of amidships, crashing through 7 decks before exploding beneath the keel. Boiler rooms flooded and 2 propellers were disabled. Speed dropped to 12 knots. Then came the killing blow. The bomb from Oberleutnant Heinrich Schmetz's aircraft, guided by Unteroffizier Oskar Huhn, struck between frames 123 and 136 at 4:02, detonating in or near the forward engine room. The No. 2 turret's 15-inch magazine exploded, blowing the entire turret overboard in a catastrophic detonation visible for miles. Roma capsized, broke in two, and sank within 20 minutes. 1,253 men died, including Admiral Bergamini and his entire staff. The battleship Italia was also struck. The Fritz X passed entirely through the ship without detonating its main charge, but she limped into Malta with over 1,000 tons of water flooding her compartments. A British officer observing from Malta later wrote that the attack demonstrated capabilities no one had anticipated. A single bomb, guided from 6 kilometers away, had destroyed a modern battleship. Naval warfare would never be the same. Within days, the same weapons devastated Allied ships supporting the Salerno landings. On September 11th, a Fritz X penetrated the roof of USS Savannah's sea turret and exploded in the ammunition handling room, killing 197 crewmen. Survivors described thinking it was a crippled aircraft falling toward them because the missile trailed smoke like a wounded plane. On September 13, HMS Uganda took a Fritz X through 7 decks, killing 16. On September 16, the same Schmetz and Huhn crew that sank Roma put a Fritz X through 6 decks of HMS Warspite, flooding her with 5,000 tons of water. The veteran of Jutland was out of action for 9 months. The HS-293 missile achieved its own devastating results. The weapon's combat debut came on August 25, 1943, when the 217E5s of the 2nd Group of KG-40 attacked British anti-submarine ships in the Bay of Biscay. This was the first air-launched use of command-guided missiles in combat in history. HMS Bideford was hit, but the warhead failed to detonate. 2 days later, on August 27th, 18 Dorniers attacked the first support group. HMS Egret became the first ship in history sunk by a guided missile. 198 men died, including 4 RAF electronics specialists who had been aboard studying German radio emissions. HMCS Athabaskan was heavily damaged. The Admiralty's response was immediate and dramatic. Warships were ordered to stay at least 200 miles from the French coast until countermeasures could be developed. The most devastating attack came on November 26, 1943 against convoy KMF, 26 steaming off Algeria, approximately 25 Heinkel He 177 heavy bombers from KG-100 launched 42 HS-293 missiles at the convoy, carrying Allied troops toward the Mediterranean theatre. Anti-aircraft fire was intense but ineffective at the ranges involved. One missile struck HMT Rohna, a British India Steam Navigation Company troopship, penetrating the engine room and detonating with catastrophic effect. 1,138 people died, including 1,015 American troops of the 853rd Engineer Aviation Battalion, which lost 495 of its roughly 823 members in a single afternoon. This remains the largest single ship loss of US servicemen at sea in the entire war, greater than the Arizona at Pearl Harbor. The disaster was classified for 50 years. Survivors were ordered to maintain silence under threat of court-martial. The American government did not publicly acknowledge that Rona was sunk by a guided missile until the 1960s. Families of the dead were told only that their sons and husbands had been lost at sea. The honest assessment of these weapons requires acknowledging their limitations. Martin Bollinger's rigorous post-war analysis found that at most, one weapon in 24 dispatched from a German airfield scored a damaging hit. KG-100's own records show 500 weapons carried on 65 missions, 319 dropped, 215 functioning correctly. The unit claimed a 49% hit rate. Allied records suggest the actual figure was far lower. The fundamental problem was vulnerability. The bombardier had to watch the weapon's tail flare throughout the 30 to 55 seconds of guidance. The aircraft had to fly straight and level. This made them extraordinarily easy targets. KG-100 lost 10 Dorniers in just 5 days at Salerno. He-177 units suffered such heavy fighter losses at Anzio, they were withdrawn entirely. The radio guidance system, once understood, could be jammed, spoofed or hijacked. British sailors nicknamed the bombs Chase Me Charlies. A rumour spread that switching on electric razors would jam the control frequencies, leading to a genuine run on razor sales aboard Royal Navy ships. The actual countermeasure effort was far more sophisticated. By January 1944, upgraded XCJ-1 jamming systems were deployed at Anzio. By Normandy in June, over 100 ships carried jamming equipment. The Type 650 transmitter exploited a design flaw in the German receiver to defeat guidance regardless of which frequency was selected. The American AIL Type MAS jammer could actually take over command of an HS-293 and steer it into the sea. By D-Day, the guided bomb threat had been neutralized. Combined with massive fighter cover, the weapons had virtually no effect on the invasion fleet. Germany produced approximately 2,400 guided munitions across both types. Fritz X achieved roughly 20 to 30% hit rates in its initial September 1943 operations before countermeasures, but sank only one major warship definitively. The HS-293 damaged or sank at least 25 vessels. Together they affected at least 36 Allied ships, including the battleship Roma, the cruiser HMS Spartan, the destroyer HMS Janus, and the troopship Rohna. The legacy extends far beyond the statistics. General Henry Hap Arnold, commander of American Air Forces, assessed after the war that Germany was ahead of the Allies by 2 to 15 years in rockets and guided missiles. Through Operation Paperclip, the US Navy acquired Dr. Herbert Wagner, designer of the HS-293, who worked at Naval Air Station Point Mugu. Soviet Operation Suavi Akim relocated German technicians in October 1946, eventually producing the missiles that sank the Israeli destroyer Eilat in 1967. More profoundly, these weapons catalyzed electronic warfare as a military domain. The Kehl-Strasbourg jamming effort, from initial failure to the elegant intermediate frequency exploit, established the template for every electromagnetic spectrum battle since. Every modern warship's electronic warfare suite traces its conceptual lineage to those desperate months in 1943 and 44. The last He-111 missile carrier missions were flown in early 1944. The aircraft that had pioneered the concept gave way to more capable platforms, then vanished as countermeasures neutralized the threat. By war's end, only 9 He-111s remained operational. The bombardier aboard that Dornier on September 9, 1943, Unteroffizier Huhn, watched through his optical sight as Roma's magazine erupted. He had just demonstrated that an aircraft could destroy a battleship from beyond the range of its guns. Admiral Bergamini, standing on Roma's bridge seconds before the explosion, never knew what killed him, a weapon that could think, that could follow, that could be steered onto its target from kilometers away. Sometimes the most important innovations come from the least expected places. The He-111 was obsolete as a bomber by 1940. It was too slow, too vulnerable, too lightly armed, and that apparent failure forced German engineers to find a new role for it. The result changed naval warfare permanently. That is the lesson of the He-111, and that is why, 8 decades later, every smart bomb, cruise missile and anti-ship weapon in every arsenal on Earth carries the conceptual DNA of those first guided weapons, tested from the wing of a failed German bomber.